We got up before dawn just to bring you
Top of the morning from beautiful downtown Baltimore.
Good morning, I'm Steve Isaiah. We're here this morning at the American Visionary Museum with Rebecca Hoffberger, founder and executive director.
There are more than 1,500 books written on the end of the Mayan calendar, most of them oriented to fear and destruction. And I thought it was very important to have a conference at the very beginning of 2012, gathering the prophetic traditions from all over the world, to be able to bring them here and speak from their hearts what their ancestors have said about these times, and then have the top, most caring, most passionate environmental scientists speak about the state of our world. There's no preaching today, there's just simply statement of fact. For example, Dr. Susan Shaw is the foremost ocean toxicologist, and she will bring up that at this point, there's not one cup of seawater anywhere on the earth that won't evidence microscopic pieces of plastic. But the way that we have altered this world, now that we're 7 billion people, has great implications for all of us. So this is a very love and caring centered conference where we hear people from West Africa traditions, from various Native American Kiowa, also the Huichol, Peruvian Inca, and even Mayan descendants speak about what they understand where we are as a humanity on this earth at this time.
I'm very glad to welcome Dr. John Racanelli. He is our new director of our National Aquarium, new to Baltimore with his family.
Some might think I'd be more interested in the 49ers game outcome today, but as a matter of fact, my wife and I have really embraced Baltimore in these less than 6 months we've been here now. And very excited about many things that are going on in this city, and certainly Ravens is a big part of that. So, kind of like the speaker that says, I understand on the last one between you and the cocktails, I hope that you all will go running out of here in a few minutes to try to catch the game, but I promised Rebecca that I'd be brief. The world ocean, and I prefer to call it the ocean, although we have several oceans, it is all, of course, one interconnected system. And so to many of us who spent a lot of our lives working on ocean issues, we think of it as the ocean. It faces a dizzying array of threats, and many of them are caused by us, and as Dr. Shaw just pointed out, we live at our peril if we don't address many of them too. From there, though, I want to talk a little bit about something that Dr. Earle has coined, a term she's coined. We've all heard perhaps about hot spots on the ocean. The Conservation International and the IUCN have a whole panoply of world hotspots which are areas that are at great risk. Working with Sylvia for 3 years, from 2007 until just last year, or the year before last, we came up with something called hope spots. And the idea is that there are still incredibly diverse, abundant, and even in some cases nearly pristine places still in this ocean of ours. And if we act now to preserve them, we can restore the life support system that sustains us, which is that ocean. Which leads to my third point, which is that we all have a part to play in this, in ensuring that the ocean, our life support system, remains both healthy and abundant and hospitable to human life. And this is, in fact, the key mission of the National Aquarium, which I now lead. I want to talk for a minute about what I mean by hope spots. How many people here have heard the term MPAs? I think Dr. Shaw mentioned it a few minutes ago. Marine protected areas. There's a whole panoply of marine protected areas. Amazingly enough, there are 4,600 of them on the planet today. But when we spend time at the Sylvia Earle Foundation working with IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, trying to map those MPAs, we found that there was no single database that showed where they all are. And when we in fact plotted the coordinates of them, we found that a few of them were located in strange places like Nepal. So it was pretty obvious to us that maybe all 4,600 of these marine protected areas were not really protecting marine areas. But marine protected areas are intended to be those areas that ranging from one range, on the one hand, let's see, I'm always going left to right because I'm a lefty, but on the one hand, fully protected, no take reserves, to those that do involve extraction and uses that are not as helpful to the marine environment. And in fact, they generally tend to merit special protection because of their diversity, because of the richness of life there, because they are often critical habitat. And sadly, in spite of the fact that they are considered marine protected areas, many of them do not have enforcement and do not have as much protection from day-to-day indignities as we might think. And so the idea of networks is critically important. Marine protected areas are best when they are in fact established as networks, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. The idea is to give the ocean a respite from human activities and a chance for recovery. So let me talk for a moment about my friend Sylvia, who, as Rebecca pointed out, has been known as her deepness. When she was at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as its chief scientist, someone figured out that made her the Sturgeon General. Sylvia is an oceanographer, an explorer, a marine biologist, a submariner, an author, a friend, and a person who has truly dedicated herself to the ocean for her entire long life. She's also 76 years old, and she's proud of that, so I'm allowed to report that to you. Going on about 20. I mean, she has more energy than the rest of us combined. It's amazing how tireless she is in her quest to do right for the oceans. And in 2009, she was awarded the TED Prize, which many of you might be familiar with. The Technology and Engineering and Design is the, thank you, entertainment. I always want to turn it to engineering. And she was the recipient of the TED Prize in 2009. And her wish, her vision, which I signed on for and have taken and brought with me to the National Aquarium, is to use all means at our disposal, whether films, expeditions, the web, submarines, to create a campaign to ignite support for a global network of marine protected areas, hope spots large enough to save and restore the ocean, the planet's blue heart. That's a vision. That's a powerful, compelling vision. It's a vision for this place. And when you think about hope spots, marine protected areas provide a lot of critical ecosystem services. I think Dr. Shaw mentioned some of this. Just the ecosystem services the ocean provides to us, to living organic things. They maintain healthy biological diversity. They are, of course, a critically important carbon sink. They generate life-giving oxygen. Some would say as many as 2 or 3 of each 5 breaths we take come from phytoplankton. They do preserve critical habitat, and they provide opportunities for research, education, low-impact tourism, and other things that humans like to do. If you try to imagine the Earth without its life-giving ocean, this is what comes to mind. It's our friend, the next planet over, Mars. No water, no blue, no green. We've really changed the environment. It's shocking to think that one smiling family, mom, dad, and little daughter, actually could take that many fish, that much biomass out of the ocean. A form of research that's called historical ecology, and people are doing studies on just the photos taken of catches by anglers. It's now well documented that 90% of the big fish are gone. But that means 10% are still there. So my parents, my planets, they live on a different planet than we do. And my son, in turn, is going to live on a different planet than the one we're living in today. And that's an important notion. It's something we need to really think about, because it's all about the planet as we're going to send it to the next generation, and what we can do now to deal with that. As Dr. Shaw demonstrated in her comments a few minutes ago, really the three key areas that I believe the ocean threats, that are the most threatening areas to the ocean, are what we take out, what we put in, and how we're changing its chemistry and dynamics. Those are really the three primary areas. What we take out, which we've just talked about, overfishing like this photo, bycatch, which again, I won't go into detail about all of these because you just heard a lot about this. Shark finning, which is continues to be an area of really damaging impact on the oceans. What we call bad fish farming, which is fish farming where there is more impact on the environment, in fact, than the benefit of the aquaculture that occurs, such as destroying the mangroves for shrimp farms and the like. And of course, oil drilling, which again, we just looked at some terrible slides about. Those are a few of the key areas. There are many others, but those are most of the extraction items. What we put in, of course, is all about carbon, which leads to the acidification, ocean warming, or extreme storms and hurricanes and other weather and climate events. Too much nitrogen, which is where those dead zones come from, and much of that comes from fertilizer, human waste, and all that hyper-nutrification, as Dr. Shaw said here in the Chesapeake, it's all about the chicken farming. Of course, trash, plastics, ghost nets, and the like that clutter the oceans and that are creating an incredible impact on the lives of seabirds and all ocean-dwelling animals. And then finally, industrial chemicals that we use, mercury, untreated stormwater runoff, hydrocarbons, as we discussed, and toxic dispersants now is a whole other form of pollutant we put in. So that's all about sort of what we're putting in. And then finally, how we're changing the ocean breaks down into a few areas. Loss of habitat to shoreline development. As you've all read and heard, some 70% of humans live within 2 hours of the shoreline. So we tend to gravitate to the shores of oceans, lakes, and streams, and other major bodies of water. And unfortunately, in our quest to be as close as possible, we change the shorelines. We armor them, we modify them, we change natural habitats into human habitats. Looking at our inner harbor here is a perfect example of that. And lack of protected zones. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about the amazing lack of ocean protected areas right now, what we can do about that. The dead zones, some say 200, we just heard 500. It's, no matter what it is, one dead zone is too many. Ghost fishing, which is the concept of these persistent and almost permanent nets that are drifting in the oceans. They don't decompose, they don't break up, they don't sink, sometimes they don't even float, but they continue to catch fish for many years. And whaling, which sadly still continues. So all of these are areas that we're changing in basic ocean, the fishing dynamics of the ocean. Okay, that's my part of the bad news. I think we've got enough of the bad news. I want to talk a little bit about the good news. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but I want to give you some ideas, some thoughts about areas where, in fact, we can change that. Because hope spots do exist everywhere. And that's what we want to talk about for the next few minutes. There are still these diverse, abundant, pristine places, hope spots. Places like Mexico's Yumbalan Biosphere Reserve, which is home to majestic whale sharks, Earth's largest fish. And in fact, in this area alone, some 300 whale sharks were observed last summer, right off within an hour of the shoreline of the Yucatan Peninsula. Over 300 whale sharks feeding on the microscopic fish eggs that are released by all the tropical and shoreline fishes that live in that region. There is, however, a shipping lane that passes very close to that. The Mexican government and its environmental organization, CONAM, has in fact arranged and working with other actors has set up a temporary marine protected area so that during the migration of the whale sharks, that shipping lane is rerouted around the area, buoys have been put out. So it's a start, it's a positive step. Parques de la Reina of Cuba, the Queen's Garden, at 2,200 square kilometers, it's the Earth's third largest barrier reef after Australia and Belize. It's a no-take reserve. There's no commercial fishing, and only 400 divers are diving this reef per year. It is very close to those oil leases that Susan talked about, and in fact, in spite of the fact that it is one of the most pristine reefs remaining in the Caribbean, it too is at risk. But right now, it is an opportunity. It's a hope spot. Mangrove habitats, as many of you probably know, are critically important to coral reefs and ocean systems throughout the world. They're the nurseries. They're the area where a lot of the small larval forms of the animals grow and mature and then return to more pelagic and open sea communities. And they also, of course, protect shorelines, and they also filter outflows from the shorelines into the oceans. The Seychelles, which is home to significant unique endemic species, including 7 distinct species of mangroves. Over 45% of this huge archipelago, thousands of square miles, are currently under meaningful protection. It's one of 2, it has 2, in fact, UNESCO World Heritage Sites on those properties, on that whole location, and one is Valley de Mayo, which some say is the original Garden of Eden. Belize, the center of the Mesoamerican Reef Complex, Earth's second largest barrier reef. Like the Seychelles, this small, diligent nation has declared its intent to protect no less than 60% of its own waters, giving loggerhead turtles a place to come back to on their 1,000-mile ocean migration. In fact, the idea right now is to work with the World Bank to forgive a significant amount of Belize's debt, which of course was incurred in the go-go years, when all thought that these loans would lead to all kinds of development. Belize put the brakes on that and said, wait a minute, why do we want to develop? We have 160,000 residents. We have one of the biggest reef systems in the world. We have these beautiful ocean waters. People come here to see this and to leave having taken pictures and memories with them. Let's work more towards trying to preserve what we have. And so there's a very unique partnership moving right now through the system with World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, the World Bank, and the Belizean government to try to create this incredibly large, 60% of their waters would be equivalent to one of the largest marine protected areas in the world. Meanwhile, back at the Gulf of Mexico, these margates are an example of what you see in an abundant, healthy Gulf. It's the 11th largest body of water in the world. It's under intense threats from, you guessed it, oil, exploration and extraction, and overfishing. And yet it's an incredibly resilient place where fish like these breed in such profusion that whales, birds, and tunas come from all over the Atlantic to find abundant food here. When they run into clouds of corexit and hydrocarbons, that's a different story, and that's why we need to protect places like that. There are a few very small and episodic protected areas on the Mexican shoreline, and some of you may be familiar with Flower Gardens National Marine Sanctuary off the Texas shore, and of course the 2 sanctuaries in Florida, but much of the Gulf of Mexico remains open to extraction and insertion and removal of things, and it is a hope spot that we deserve, that deserves our protection. The California coastline is Big Sur, or I used to hang my hat. Robert Louis Stevenson called it the greatest meeting of land and sea in the world, and it's now home to a network of marine life protected areas, created by the California Marine Life Protection Act. And it's been a long time coming. It's now up to 18% of the coast of California's waters, not a bad start. It only goes out to the states, 3 miles of it, because after that you're back in federal waters where, unfortunately, oil leases are often sold, and this is the Central Coast complex of the 3 network areas of the state's 1,000-mile coastline. The concept there is to have networks where fish can find fish and other animals, but especially the mobile animals, fish and mammals, can find respite from the kinds of intense pressures that are put on them by us, by humans. These networks are often designed to have a variety of different levels of protection. So there are special reserve areas, complete no-take areas, and even no-entry areas. Fishermen nowadays talk about fishing the line, and the line is not the fishing line, it's the line of the marine protected area. The good news, inside the protected area, everybody's safe. Bad news, fish don't really know where the line is. Some probably do, because it doesn't take long for genetic selection natural selection to create those who know and those who don't. But the idea behind it, I think, is good. I think one of the things that we at the National Aquarium, and I think that many others in the conservation and environmental movement recognize, is with 1.7 billion humans getting most of their protein from the ocean, it's not like we're going to just stop all fishing. When I talked to my friend Sylvia about seafood, and by the way, you know, we used to eat a lot of chicken until I started telling her about the Chesapeake and the impact of chicken farming here on the Chesapeake Bay. Her attitude is no fish is edible, but we take a slightly different view. Many of those of us in the aquarium world have worked hard to try to get people to understand that there are sustainable fish stocks and species that we can continue to gain protein from. Much more efficiently, by the way, than from some land-based protein sources like cows. But that there are many that are not, and that we really need to understand the difference between that. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Seafood Watch, which is a great app for your phone, or a little card that you can get for each different region. And it'll show you things like the fact that if you do one thing today, go out of here and never again eat Chilean sea bass. With all due respect to any restaurateurs in the room, Chilean sea bass is really Patagonian toothfish. The fish marketing people figured out that wasn't going to sound that attractive to people, so they renamed it Chilean sea bass. It's neither a bass nor is it necessarily Chilean. It's a fish that lives thousands of feet below the surface. It is a fish that actually can live to be 160 years old. And if you get Chilean sea bass tonight at your favorite restaurant, what you'll get is a fish that's probably as old as your grandparents. And when you think about that, it just doesn't make sense to eat that kind of, that's not an efficient way to find protein. Because they're so long-lived, these are fish that reproduce very, very slowly, and because they reproduce very slowly, they can't absorb the kind of impact that major industrial-scale fisheries put on them. By contrast, striped bass, short life cycle, fairly abundant in these waters these days. Mahi-mahi, another one that has only a 2-year life cycle, so especially in aquaculture, closed system aquaculture these days, mahi-mahi is a very safe choice. Good old catfish, freshwater, vegetarian, and you want to spice it up a bit. But when you get down to it, there are at least a dozen major species of commercially viable fish species that people eat today that are generally considered to be quite sustainable. And if that's the case, why would we need to eat large tuna?
Invasive species breeding.
Interesting. The question is, what about invasives? And that's a great point. We're still working. We're doing a program at the aquarium called Fresh Thoughts, and we had a lionfish dinner recently, and it actually tasted great. You've got to know how to remove. Unfortunately, a lot of these invasives are well protected from the predatory species that would otherwise feed on them by things like poisonous spines. The lionfish has poisonous spines, and it's not a fish you want to just go out and grab by hand, for example, or take and throw in your pan. You've got to know how to remove the toxin, but it's actually not difficult to do. The snakehead, we have a dinner next Wednesday or Thursday night, Tuesday night. At the aquarium, we're going to be eating snakehead, and what's the other one? Oh, and of course the catfish, the non-native catfish from the Potomac. Dr. Shaw would probably say, good luck. But I think the idea here is that in some areas, some of these fishes, they don't bioaccumulate quite as much as the apex predators, because again, if you're low in the food chain, you don't have as much time to accumulate the bad things that unfortunately marine animals are bioaccumulating in very frightening amounts. We have to act now. It's not something that we can sit on. As Dr. Earl has said, the next 10 years may be the most important in the next 10,000. The best chance our species will have to protect what remains of the natural systems that give us life. The ocean is our life support system. It's where we get a lot of our oxygen, it's where we put a lot of our carbon, it's what creates the weather that we have, it's what keeps the balance, the planet in a sense of balance. The important point, I think, that we all have to remember is that this is more about us than it is about the planet. The planet has suffered how many extinction events now? It's 4 that we know of. As Buckminster Fuller says, on Spaceship Earth, we're not the only experiment. And that brings me to the point I want to make about opportunity. For my part, I believe we have a huge opportunity to take visitors to aquariums like ours, to a place beyond inspiration and towards action, and to build on what could become the core of a new conservation movement globally. The millennials, which are the people born after, I think, 1985, will soon number 100 million people of voting age, adults who are out in the world and are more receptive to the fact that we have a role in environmental stewardship. In fact, twice as much, based on surveys that have been done by the Ocean Project, twice as much as, frankly, those who are of the, I was going to say species, the generation that preceded them, or generations. Likewise, another group of households called HESLs, households where English is the second language. Amazingly, especially the Latino households, are dramatically more inclined to believe that we have a role in protecting the ocean, that the ocean is important to our lives, and that there are steps that we need to take that aren't happening now. In both cases, millennials and HESLs, there is a huge number of people who are looking for ways to become part of the solution. At the National Aquarium, we're increasing time, talent, and financial resources that we invest in social media, mobile apps, and web platforms to communicate with these largely untapped audiences, to try to get them to see the opportunities and the hopes that if we do, in fact, modify the way we do what we do, there is hope. So as we look at some of the different ways that can happen, we're re-examining our messages to go beyond mere awareness at the aquarium towards driving conservation action. That's become one of our 3 strategic anchors, one of our primary motivators for what we do at both individual and community levels. So everything from skip the plastic bags to, for the sake of sea turtles, to wash your clothes in cold water to conserve coral reefs, voting your conscience, participating in shoreline cleanups. All of these things are things that we're trying to do now, trying to inspire people to do, so that it's not just about awareness, it's really about action. That's the stage that we're at now. And that's where the hope and hope spots comes from. Yes, the precautionary principle, as Dr. Shaw points out, is hugely important to what we do here. It's the kind of thing that we need to take the assumption that if we do the right things and do positive things and diminish our impacts, that they will in fact have a positive impact on the planet. One of the people I would encourage you to look up if you don't know about the work of William McDonough, talk about enlightened environmental design. He's just an amazing guy. I had the pleasure to sit and listen to him a few years ago and have constantly gone back to some of the things that he's proposing and doing in this world. Frankly, so is our Dr. Sylvia Earle. She's really been a voice for both inspiration but also for action around what we can do when it comes to the oceans. In short, it's just time to do our part. In fact, if you want to get more ideas along the lines of what Dr. Shaw flashed on the screen, you can go to our website, aqua.org, and go to the conservation section. It's a whole panoply of things that we recommend to people that they can do. Wrapping up, amazingly, only 1% of our ocean, the world ocean, is currently under protection. 1%. Something like 12% is protected on the land masses. And by the way, as we all know, the land masses comprise less than a fourth of the total coverage of the planet. So you've heard me call the ocean our planet's blue heart, which I've taken from my friend Sylvia with her permission. And the question that we always ask is, how much of our heart should we protect? Is 1% enough? It doesn't feel like it. It makes our lives possible. It's our life support system. And I think it's probably time to return the favor. Thank you very much.
Just like to remind people that it took all of recorded human history to reach 1 billion people on the planet in 1805. Today, we're at 7 billion plus, having reached that in October. So if we're talking about, I think the unifying comment from this morning's native speakers, and certainly Dr. Shaw and Mr. Racanelli, is change of behavior. Very hard to do it when we still sell an old paradigm.